Okay, I am joined by Pastor Shannon Wright. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So put pastor in front.
Whichever way makes you more comfortable, we're good.
Okay. So tell me, what made you want to run for mayor of Baltimore City?
So, when we moved here, there were some issues in the city and all that sort of thing. And then 2015, as we all know, there were a whole bunch of issues in the city, to put it mildly.
Definitely.
And my grandmother always said, if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So it was time to put that first and do some things that needed to be done here in the city.
I understand. So let's talk a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up?
In New York and New Jersey.
Okay. What led you to politics?
Our kids, honestly. Politics was nowhere in my plan for my future, and in any way, shape, or form. We were raising 4 kids, and I really didn't like a lot of the things that were going on in their schools. So folks said, well, if you really want to have a voice in that, you need to start coming out to Board of Education meetings. And then the folks there said, well, we implement the policies, we don't always make the policies, so you need to talk to the elected folks. And the elected folks said, well, are you a part of our party? Do you live in our district? Do you vote for us? I said, oh, okay. So I need to answer those questions before we can talk about what you're doing or not doing for my children and all
Were
the
these
children
elected
in the
officials
school.
that said this?
Yes. So I said, okay. So it's time for me to step up and be a part of the solution.
So to borrow from your slogan a little bit, why are you right for Baltimore?
Baltimore needs leadership that is not beholden to the party, whichever party, political structure, and someone that is of an age to be able to understand the need to put people first. My kids are grown. I've done what I've wanted to do with my career. There is no one other than that man sitting over there that y'all can't see on camera that at this stage in game I need to be accounted to. So this is a time in my life for me to be able to do this in a way that I can actually pursue what I genuinely feel is in the best interest of the people in the city.
So historically, this is a Democratic city.
Is it?
Well, I mean,
I've
the
heard
last
that
mayor,
somewhere.
the last Republican mayor, 1967.
Yes, to put it in perspective, he left office the year I was born.
Okay, yeah, and so we're talking about Theodore McKeldin.
Yes.
Served 2 terms as mayor of Baltimore, 20 years apart though, and in between that he was governor of Maryland. So what makes you so bold as to try to be a conservative in office in Baltimore?
So, I'm a pastor, and the Bible talks about a whole bunch of bold folks. So it's just time to put that boldness out there. That is not for the campaign. That is me. There are some folks that might even say that I've always been this way. I don't know why. I think I'm a quiet person personally, but I don't know. Those folks over there kind of smiling about that.
Yeah.
So they may not agree. This city needs bold leadership. You know,
Agreed.
we've got a homicide rate that I believe as of today is at 267, which is up from 241 this time last year, an increase of 26, and we're in October. We are in a place where we very well might break the records that we've held, which are not good records to be breaking. You've got a situation where everyone in the city, representing the city on the local and the state side, and federal for this city, are all from one party. Now, I grew up hearing the phrase that whenever there's a disagreement, there's your side, their side, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. We've only had one side since 1967. There's been no true conversation, no new thought and idea. And clearly the processes that are in place here in the city at the very best are not working and at least are broken. And it's time to change that.
We definitely need change. I definitely agree with that. So let's unpack some things. Okay. How important is transparency and accountability to you?
I think it's very important. Okay, so for example, there has not been a budget that has come through where it has not undergone some scrutiny and someone has not been talking about some amount of millions of dollars that's missing. Now, when we talk about we need money for infrastructure, as you can see by the condition of the roads driving from one part of the city to the other and all the water main breaks, yet you get money and you lose money. You talk about we don't have enough funds for the schools, yet the per pupil rate paid in Baltimore City is more than a lot of schools, private schools tuition. But yet we still can't seem to get it done. So yes, we need some transparency and accountability. We need some performance and fiscal responsibility. Because the money's coming in, but where's it going? When you look at the amount of folks that are underemployed, when you look at the lack of opportunities in the city, clearly the resources are not being used in a manner to put the people first. That needs to change.
So that's one of the backbones of conservatism, is that that physical responsibility part, and that is definitely something that is not happening now.
No.
So let's speak on some specifics. So back in the springtime, as you know, the city had a ransomware attack.
It did.
And so the city computers here, the IT structure is old.
Yes.
And vulnerable.
Yes.
And we were held hostage, so
Yes.
to speak.
Yes.
Hackers wanted $76,000 to release Baltimore's files.
Right.
The mayor said no.
Right.
What would you have said?
So I'd like to think I wouldn't have been in that position, and I'm going to tell you why. The city of Baltimore was informed more than 4 years ago that their system was antiquated.
Definitely.
And vulnerable. So this is not a new thing. An ounce of prevention is a lot cheaper than a pound of cure. That $77,000, because the city didn't take care of it when they should have, ended up being over $10 million.
Correct.
With all of the fixes and the cures. Countless folks ended up in legal hot water because of the city not being able to manage its different departments and agencies, people that tried to pay water bills to get off of what was going to be the auction list and things like that, where at that point, even trying to pay it, the city couldn't take the money because its systems were down. So again, I would like to think I would not be in that position, because knowing that the infrastructure, the technological infrastructure, was vulnerable for years before this happened, and the fact that that was not the first hack, I'd like to think it wouldn't have gotten that far.
Right. What are your thoughts on the infamous squeegee kids? They've been a source of hot debate, and I think that a lot of focus is put on them. But I do think it's a reason, because I think that a lot of people tend to point to the squeegee kids as being people that are committing crimes as well. And what are your thoughts on squeegee kids?
So here's my thoughts. If we were a city that valued our youth and opportunities for our youth, I think that there might be just a few more youth that would do something that, quote unquote, people would find more gainful use of their time. I don't think what they're doing falls on them. I think it falls on the leadership not providing enough viable opportunities for our youth. The folks that you hear complaining the most are the business folks that have very little interaction with the youth, with that exception. So it seems to me, youth don't come into this world asking for problems and giving problems. They're either taught that, or they're not taught and allowed to go that way. So if we're doing our jobs as adults, forget leadership or elected, as adults, we're looking out for them, and that's not happening here.
I agree. If you were elected, you would have to work. When you're elected, you will have to work closely with Commissioner Harrison, who is the police commissioner. What are your thoughts on the job he's done so far, and more specifically, his crime plan? Okay.
So you said if, and I corrected that to when.
Yes.
That I would have to work with Commissioner Harrison. Well, let me ask you a question first. How many commissioners we've had in the last 5 years?
We talk about that pretty often.
Yep, doesn't matter.
We talk about that often.
The point with that is there's no assurance that he will still be the commissioner.
Okay.
That's number one. And he should not be if he cannot get it together. And what I mean by that is this. If you are the police commissioner, you are the one responsible for overseeing policing. you work with the officers. Now, if FOP3 is looking at what you're saying, and from a people perspective, people as in law enforcement officers, it will not work. The two of you can't get together. I mean, those two entities, the officers and the management, can't get together. We have no hope of them actually being able to resolve the issues in the city.
So I think that every mayor that the last few mayors have all brought in their own commissioner at some point in time.
Some have brought in more than one.
That's true. So it seems like you're leaning more towards you would replace him.
No, I'm leaning towards, well, let me put it this way. I'm leaning towards replacing anyone that can't get the job done. And that's across the board. Whether that be with the police, schools, Department of Public Works, wherever it may be.
A few points that that are important to you that we have not discussed specifically. Public safety. What are some improvements that your administration would make towards public safety?
So the first thing I would try and do is really make sure that the police department has officers that want to be here and want to be working in Baltimore and are willing to understand the culture and the subcultures in Baltimore so that they are not doing broad brushstroke policing, but actual more community policing depending on the needs of that individual neighborhood that they're working in. That's number one. I think when you break it down, you can be a lot more accurate and effective in terms of what's needed in that area. What's needed on one side of the city is not the same thing that's needed on the other.
That's
so
true.
I think we really have to take an individual approach to by neighborhood and community by community. And I think in doing that alone, we will start to rebuild, hopefully, some of the trust between the community and the police department. Because the problem is, if there are folks committing crimes and crime rates are high, the first thing you do is you call the police. But when you see things in the news like the gun trace task force or other issues like that, it makes you hesitate for that split minute.
Yes.
So if there's nothing else you can count on in the place you call home, you need to be able to count on that when you dial 911, somebody's going to answer and somebody's going to show up. And that somebody that's going to show up is going to help you, not make you more of a victim.
And what about housing?
What specifically? There's so many areas in that.
What sticks out to you as far as the abandoned buildings?
Okay. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
Now, we got a whole bunch of abandoned buildings, and we got a whole bunch of homeless folk, and we got a whole bunch of unemployed and underemployed folk. Now, it seems to me, if the city leadership was really looking to use the resources at its disposal, it would do some things with HUD. It would reach out to Section 3 and try and create some workforce programs that actually work, and not just say that, but actually do that. I would get some folks employed and skilled in the areas of carpentry and construction and all of that. I would take some of those abandoned properties. I would employ folks to get them back up to code. And I would create some jobs and some homes for some people that clearly need both in this city. We've got all the key pieces we need to make this city awesome and wonderful. Now, being Republican, I know you thought I was going to say make Baltimore great again, but I'm not going to go there.
It was definitely something that I was expecting you to say some point in time. Something that Mary Bubala said has stuck with me, and that is about moving in another direction. And I think that most people know she was referring to women in this leadership position.
Was she? Is that what she was referring to?
Well, what else do you think she could have been? Tell me.
She could have meant stocking colors. I don't know. I'm not in her mind. All jokes aside.
Yes. She could have been a Democrat.
She could have. She could have meant a whole bunch of different things. I think with regards to that whole issue and what she said and how it was taken, folks are very sensitive in the city right now. Should she have said what she said? Perhaps not. Would she have been able to say it if she were someone other than herself? Perhaps. But she was partly correct. We do need a different type of leadership in the city. But it has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with ideals, ideas, and policies. The policies and the ideas that have been in place in this city for generations, for decades, are not working. So when you look at it in terms of a different type of leadership, yes, we do. Does it have anything to do with gender? No. It has to do with ideas.
When elected, you're definitely going to have to do what they call reach across the aisle.
Absolutely.
Is that something that you would be able to do?
Absolutely. So my background makes that easier for me to do. Being a pastor and being someone that believes in that book first, there are certain things in there that you are supposed to do and supposed to not do. Those will help me to be able to reach out to all people. Because see, any elected leader, regardless of party, gender, persuasion, whatever, purple, pink, I don't care. You are elected to serve those that elected you. And if you put that first, you will be able to work with other folks because you're putting the best interest of the people in your city, in your district first. My background, I was a member of the NAACP. I was a board member in New Jersey and in New York. I was one of the lead negotiators in a $300 million DSEG case in New York. I trained under Hazel Dukes, and anybody that really knows the NAACP and the board and all of that knows who Hazel Dukes is. There's no way that I could do this job without the understanding that I'd have to reach across party lines. For me, the party I belong to is how I am able to register to vote. But it's the ones that have the policies that best affect the people in the city or who I want to work with. I don't care what party you're part of.
Some of the people that are vying for the same position that you are vying for may speak about separation between church and state.
Okay.
How would you address that?
That's how the laws and the policies are written in this country. There's a separation between church and state. I'm all right with that. But I will say this. The separation of church and state should not separate the state from ethics and morals and what is right. Now, you could take the whole legal issue of church and state up out of it, but we have not seen folks that are ethically and morally centered and grounded in this city, not in the mayoral leadership position.
That is true. You know, I have a lot of conservative friends. I have a lot of liberal friends. And I lean toward independent.
Okay.
But a lot of things that you said so far made sense to me. And I'm not surprised. You had a quote on your website that I want to read, and I want to ask you about it. So it says, "It is the role of the mayor to lift the city's burdens and frustrations from off the people that they may overcome, prosper, and thrive in a premier city of the future. Our better days are ahead, and together we can make Baltimore the leading and prosperous American city it was ordained to be for all of our families and future generations." I love that. How do you propose we achieve those goals?
So when you think of home, when you're young, when you're in your teens, if you are actually thinking about when you get older and what you want, if you want to live in the suburbs or in a city, if you want, if you're going to be a stay-at-home or work in the workforce, you have some ideas of what you want. But regardless of what those issues may be, everybody wants someplace that's safe. Everybody wants someplace that when they get to that point where they're having children, that their children will be safe. That when you send your children to school, you have a reasonable hope that they will come home a little bit smarter and with all the parts and pieces they left with. We need to start with basics. We need to make our streets safer. We need to make sure that our schools are not just, are educating our children and are safe buildings and places for them to be in. And I think if we start to do those two things as a top priority, then we will see something happen all on its own, which is businesses coming back into the city, creating more job opportunities, so that the job opportunities come to the city doesn't have to go out and buy them. this city gives away a lot.
True.
And the city gives away a lot and then cries broke. So we kind of have to find a balance up in there, which is why I said it's time for a new leadership thought. You cannot sit here in Baltimore, where it is completely democratic in terms of the leadership, and talk about what the Republicans have done when, first of all, there hasn't been one in decades in this city. So whatever the issues are in this city are because of the leadership in this city. And once we take responsibility and ownership of that, then we can start to fix that. But that cannot happen with only the leadership that has been here. We don't need new faces with the same old ideas. We need new faces and new ideas.
So we do have a Republican governor, and I want to throw you a curveball.
Uh-oh.
Do you support an impeachment inquiry?
Well, you were talking about the governor, and then you said impeachment.
I know.
Are we trying to impeach Governor Hogan?
No, we're talking about Trump. We're talking about Trump.
Oh, okay. So here's the
I just said that so you have a friend in Annapolis.
and then,
I pivoted. And then I pivoted to DC, right?
So here's the thing. There are a lot of folks that are in favor of impeachment for President Trump. I personally...
Just an inquiry. I'm not even talking about taking him out of office. I'm just saying...
Well, I don't think anybody should be above an inquiry if there are things that you're doing that are not correct. But I do think that process, we need to be careful how we do that. About a week to 10 days ago, there was a period of 2 days when folks started really talking about this inquiry, that the markets dropped 800 points.
True.
So I think if folks are going to do, and this is in any party, if folks are going to look at this as a political stunt, they really need to think real sure and careful on how they're going to do that and why they're going to do it. Because this is going to affect more than just a person you're looking to impeach. You're going to throw our economy into chaos. You're going to throw our standing in terms of the global marketplace and the global political structure into chaos. So no one should be above that process. But I think when you want to engage in that process, you need to be doggone skippy sure what your reasons are.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it is in order to happen. And I guess I look at it like the president put us in that position, not the people who are trying to be the check and balance of what he has potentially done.
Okay. So this is a soft way of getting me more into DC and national politics, I understand.
Soft.
So I'm gonna stick my toe in knowing that's where I'm going. When 2016 came around and that election cycle happened, and folks voted for Donald Trump, the one thing I will say about this president, he said who he was, what he was about, and he meant that. He didn't change that. He said, I'm not a politician. I don't live in your world. I write checks to your world, but I don't know your rules. I know these rules over here. And he got elected. So for him to get elected and then all of a sudden be presidential is a bit unfair of an expectation.
It was the expectation, though.
It was. It absolutely was.
It was the expectation.
But you know why? That's because we're used to having folks that campaign and say, I'm going this way, get elected, and go right over that way.
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of people assumed that he had decency. You know, there's some things that are said, and then there's some things that are understood and not said. You know what I mean? I know that if I have mud on my shoes and I walk in someone's house, I'm going to try to take the shoes off, wipe the shoes off on the mat, something to not dirty up the carpet. This is not a said thing. You know what I mean? I don't have to say that. And then if you step on my carpet with the mud and I'm looking at you like, oh my God, you're like, well, you know I'm ghetto. You know, but I ain't think you were going to walk on my carpet with mud on your shoes.
Let me tell you something. Ghetto ain't got nothing to do with walking in somebody's house with mud on your shoes. But we don't have to go there. Because I spent the first years of my life living in the projects in New York. And my grandmother would dare anybody to walk up in her house in those projects.
I'm sure.
Okay? So that ain't
and
got nothing to do
probably
with
kept the
that.
place super clean.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But in terms of where we are now, in this political climate and with this president. I think that it's very important that folks remember two things. The office of the president is an institution bigger than the one individual at a time that sits in that office.
Definitely.
And that regardless of who the individual is of the moment, that office has to be protected. The Constitution has to be protected. And I think when anyone does something that clearly questions either, then we're kind of supposed to look at it a little closer.
Absolutely.
So I don't think for me, that's not based on party. That's based on right and wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that a lot of your fellow conservatives agree with that, and I think that the point of contention is whether or not this justifies looking at. A lot of them that are defending him and saying he didn't really do anything wrong. So if he did something wrong, then that would be something different. And I think that is the stance that they're on. But I think we've been in D.C. too long. We
got enough to talk about here.
Yes, absolutely. So the last thing I want to ask you about is the Preakness.
Mm-hmm.
How important is the Preakness to Baltimore? Do you think that we should roll over to keep them here? Or what are your thoughts on the Preakness staying in Baltimore?
Well, isn't that an interesting thing? There are a lot of folks that would say we need to keep the race because of the jobs, because of the economic boost that it gives in tourism alone during that part of time of the year. And I get that. But we also have to be very careful of how much we give away to get that.
Yeah.
There are some truths out there that the neighborhood around the track needs some work. The community needs some help and needs some resources. Now, I understand that the deal has already been written. I understand that I believe it's $375 million going that, and the other place with regards to that some of the training and the housing of the horses is going to move to Laurel, I believe. But the interesting fly in the ointment, of course, is that the founder of the company and father of the family is now saying that the daughter didn't have the right to make that deal. And his concern is that there should be some other parts of that deal, like urban farming, like food processing, like being able to teach things and do things in this city to benefit the folks that live in this city. Now, to me, that's an interesting thought, because this is a city that has a whole bunch of food deserts, which means that you are more than a quarter of a mile from a place to get, quote, good, nutritious food. So many food deserts that, in fact, the folks in the city now are saying that we're not going to count and put a number to food deserts. We're just going to say that we have food priority challenge areas. And that we are now up to a point where there are so many food deserts now being called food priority challenge areas that 1 in 4 residents of the city of Baltimore is food insecure. So it seems to me we need to do that component of what he was saying with regards to the deal for Preakness was of interest to me because of that problem here in the city.
It's a big problem.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, people argue about whether we should talk about still paying and being softer on school lunch programs, but you got folks that school lunch is the least of their problems. They're not getting other food.
So when people talk about the food desert,
Mm-hmm.
and I am a capitalist,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand economics,
Mm-hmm.
I understand business,
Mm-hmm.
and if I have an establishment that's in an area
Mm-hmm.
that is not making the money that I needed to make,
Mm-hmm.
I close the business. It's very simple.
I understand.
And so in the neighborhood that we grew up in, there was a small grocery store in our neighborhood that eventually closed because when they opened a newer supermarket a little bit further away, everybody in the neighborhood wanted to go to that supermarket,
Right.
as opposed to the supermarket that was close to us. They eventually closed due to business dwindling, and I think that this is the situation that a lot of neighborhood supermarkets dealt with. I just think it's one of those things that just happens. I don't see a way around it.
I do. There are some organizations and agencies partially funded by the FDA and a few other federal agencies that have been assisting with and doing research on making cooperative food markets and nonprofit food markets, so that there are incentives in place so that the business owner does not take that financial hit of being an area where the capitalist side of him will not make what he could someplace else.
So we're going to bail out the supermarkets.
Nope. What you do is you make the supermarket a nonprofit entity, so it's not supposed to show a profit. That's number one. Number two, there are provisions in place in almost every major federal agency for workforce development in that sector, whether it's agriculture, education, whichever one it is, to be able to put programs in place that really uplift a community with regards to that specific issue. So in terms of food and food deserts, there are multiple agencies that have programs out there that have combined to become nonprofit food cooperatives so that it's not a bailout, but that it actually functions. It doesn't make a profit because it's nonprofit, but it serves the need of filling that food desert gap without causing a hardship to the man that's opening, or the man or woman that's opening a food market for the specific purpose of that bottom line.
Right.
And I think that's something we need to be looking into.
I like that. That was creative and unique. I like that. How can people support your campaign and follow your movement?
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Wright for Baltimore. You can find me online at our website, which is wrightformaryland.com. I am pretty active on both. On Twitter, I am PSW number 4 letter U. And I'm pretty responsive to my own social media.
I really thank you for taking time to speak with me. I really appreciate it. Anything you want to say?
I thank you for extending the invitation and not being as politically challenging as you could have been.
Yes. Because my thing is not to. I want to. It's never my intention to attack anyone or make it more difficult than than it has to be. I want to present a conversation where people can understand. And I'm not really big on labels, although labels are important. I think labels are super important, so you can know this is left, this is right, this is center. But I want to focus more on the issues and more on how your campaign, your administration can benefit the community.
And I appreciate that. This election cycle, more than any other, needs to be about solutions.
Yes.
Not backbiting, personal attacks, any of that other stuff. It needs to be about solutions. This city does not have the ability to wait another 4 years for folks to get elected that understand that concept. This is the cycle right now where we need new leadership with new ideas that understands this has to be about solutions.
Agreed. Thank you again.
Thank you.